Good afternoon, everyone. I am so delighted to welcome you all to this lovely event. I'm Pat Lupke. I'm the Dean of the School of Professional Studies at Alverno. And for those of you who have a burning desire to know what professional studies is, that encompasses the departments of education, business, and graduate psychology. So those are the areas that are considered part of the School of Professional Studies. I'm thrilled to welcome you all, faculty, staff, and especially the students. This is a very special event. Every Alverno student experiences at least 4 momentous occasions during their time here at Alverno. The first is when you decided to invest in your future by coming to Alverno. The second, and it might not have been that long ago, was when we celebrated your transition in moving from professional advising to your major advisor in the academic department. That was particularly important because it's significant that you've made substantive progress in demonstrating Alverno's abilities and succeeding in your coursework. And we know that that coursework gets a little bit more difficult each year. Today is the third big occasion as we recognize you for entering upper division coursework in the area of your major. For all of you, it's a huge milestone. It's been achieved through a lot of hard work, commitment, and perseverance. So you should all feel very proud of yourself for having reached this milestone. And of course, the fourth milestone, who wants to guess what that might be? You got it, graduation. Raise your hand, please, if you're graduating either in May or December. Aha. So for you, the light at the tunnel is getting brighter and brighter, isn't it? Today, we're here to honor you for your persistence and your accomplishment to date. And we'd like you all to give yourselves a round of applause. This is an event that we hold each semester as a college. And we ask a colleague to talk to us about one or more of their intellectual heroes. Heroes are important. They can inspire us, they can motivate us, they can provide models for our own further intellectual growth, they can shape who we are and what we do. Our heroes live through us and beyond us. It's kind of a ripple effect. And as we are affected by our heroes, our actions influence others, who then influence others, and so it goes. I have every confidence that you will be the intellectual hero for someone else, if you're not already there. This afternoon, our guest speaker will speak for approximately 20 minutes. Then at the end of her speech, I'll come back up here and fill you in on where you go from there. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Stephani Richards-Wilson is an assistant professor in the School of Professional Studies in the Business Division. She's also director of our graduate program in business. That includes the MBA and 2 other programs. At this point in time, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Stephani Richards-Wilson.
Thank you, Pat. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Great, thank you. I'd like to commend you as well for reaching this stage. I've been there several times, and I know how much hard work and dedication this takes. So I'm thrilled and honored to be here. I hope you are inspired with my talk. I have 7 PowerPoint slides and a short movie that I made that's also 7 minutes. So if you can just bear with me. As Dean Lupke had mentioned, I'm a business faculty member. One of my doctorates is in business education, but the second one is in German literature. So my first question is, did everyone get a handout when you came in? Because you're going to need that at the end of the presentation. Yes, you have it? Great, so hold on to that. Before I start, I'd also like to thank Gwen, Alice, Raleigh, and Jerry for helping me get ready for today. I hope you are inspired by what I have to say. And I'd like to thank them for helping me out. The handout will become relevant in just a few minutes. I have many intellectual heroes, and I hope you do as well. But when I was asked to give this talk, I focused on some who made the most impact on me, and I hope they impact you before you leave. One of these individuals behind me was the focus of my second dissertation from UW-Madison in German. And his name is Willy Graf of the White Rose. He is in the center of this presentation. Have any of you heard of the White Rose? A couple of you. The White Rose, as you can see, were university students, the ages of 21 to 25, very similar to you, and their professor. And they are the most well-known Nazi resistance group in Hitler's Third Reich. They made a huge impact, and they continue to make an impact today. So similar to what Dean Lupke was saying, I hope you will consider making an impact, similar to what these young students did, taking on Adolf Hitler, the Nazis, and the Gestapo. Many, many books, movies, plays, performances have been about the White Rose. Most of them are in other languages, Russian, German, French, even Japanese. There are some in English if you want to Google this after the presentation. So Germany has a long tradition of storytelling. So I hope that my story and the story of the White Rose will connect you to making your own lifelong story. And that's the purpose of my talk. Their story is they were a group of university students in Munich, Germany during the Third Reich. 1942-43 is when they got together to read. They were initially like a book club, and they discussed cultural things, literature, poetry, books, because at the time things were censored by the Nazis and the Gestapos, and most of the books that they wanted to read were banned or burned, and so it was hard to get good reading. This is the book that inspired them, Die Weiße Rose, the White Rose. Ironically, it has to do with us over here on the other side of the Atlantic. The White Rose is about a big, nasty American corporation that tries to take over the land to drill oil in Mexico. And the Hacienda, the White Rose, Die Weiße Rose, objects to it. This is one of the books that inspired the university students and the professor to create and disseminate many, many flyers calling for resistance to the Gestapo. A book having to do with us, a fiction, it's novel, way over here on the other side of the Atlantic. Today, if you go to Germany, especially in Munich, but other parts of Germany, you will see many schools and streets named after the White Rose. These photos are current. I took them just a few months ago when I was in Munich. You can go to the university or the apartments where the students lived, and you will see white roses. You will often see candles lit. They were the light among the darkness. You might see some other notes left for the students, because the students and the professor were eventually caught and executed by the Nazis. That's in Germany, but what you should know is as recent as 2017, their story continues to impact and influence students over here. In fact, these students were from Madison and produced and put on a play called The White Rose. They did it in Madison and in Chicago. So again, think about how you will craft your life story, who you want to impact and influence, and how to do it. Imagine what these students could have done with social media. And now to my most prominent hero, I'll say, is Willy Graf. And Willy Graf is the subject of my second dissertation. Willy Graf was only 25 years old when he was executed by the Nazis. He helped distribute the flyers. He was a combat medic, meaning he was sent to the Russian front not once, but twice, dodging bullets, helping remove bodies, helping the injured. And oh, by the way, he also did that with the enemies. He helped the enemy with their wounds and cared for them. He's one of the core members. The White Rose Circle is a little bit bigger. They say it's about 50 people who helped them, but the core 6, the 5 university students and their professor, are the ones who got executed. He read 40 books in 1 year. 40 books in 1 year. And that's why he's my intellectual hero. 40 books in 1 year, 1942. What else was he doing? Well, he was on the Russian front. He was serving in the German army. He was drafted as a medic. He also had medical studies to pursue. He also liked to ski and fence and run, go to concerts, and in between all of that, imagine you're in school, reading 40 books in 1 year. How do I know that? Because he took a great time to record everything he did, even the books that he read in his diaries. So whatever Willie Graff read, I read. And that's the culmination of what I'm trying to tell you. What fills your mind, how you spend your time, and with whom you spend it will impact your decisions and life choices. And it's because of Willie Graff liking and loving books and literature that he got to know the other members of the White Rose. And so now, I'd like to share a movie that I made. It's only 7 minutes to explain exactly what they did. And then I have one other slide, and we'll get to your handout. I hope you have a pen. Here comes the movie. I presented this at a conference last year. The voice, the male voice, is my husband.
Once upon a time, in a land far away, a group of students and their professor wanted to change their world. They came together in Germany, the land of magical castles and medieval legends and lore. Their countrymen were known for their magnificent contributions to culture, poetry, music, art, and literature.
It was a beautiful, bucolic place and home to the most famous storytelling of all time. Grimm's fairy tales and fables. Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Cinderella. Germany was also the land of Martin Luther, of great thinkers, and writers whose plays, essays, and stories are still enjoyed today. The students knew their works and pondered their words, but they wanted to craft a story of their own, because this wasn't the Germany that they knew or lived. Theirs was no fairy tale.
Everything changed when the Second World War broke out. Germany, once known for its Dichter and Denker, poets and thinkers, had become the land of Richter and Henker, Nazi judges and executioners. And there was a dark side to this story. The students first gathered in Munich to discuss literature. Today, they and their professor are known as perhaps the most famous resistance circle in Nazi Germany, the White Rose. They longed for the Germany of the past, in which human welfare, dignity, and respect for humanity eclipsed the world's dark story.
In 1942 and 1943, the White Rose worked in secret, and in the cover of darkness to produce and distribute flyers calling on their fellow Germans to resist Hitler and his henchmen. It took tremendous courage, and it was time-consuming work, using only a duplicating machine.
Although the core 6 members were arrested by the Gestapo and executed in 1943, their iconic story of hope and resilience lingers. Those who know it look to them as role models and examples of how ordinary individuals can make an extraordinary difference in the darkest of times. One of the students, Willie Graff, had refused to join the Hitler Youth. He was a voracious reader and read close to 40 books alone in 1942-1943, including authors banned by the Nazis. He spent much of his time searching for hope in humanity after the injustices and atrocities he had witnessed at the hands of his fellow Germans, both on the home front and battlefield. Munich had been the birthplace of the Nazi movement, but it was also the place of the counter-movement, the White Rose. Both had used words as weapons. The former used them to incite violence and war, and the latter to promote peace and resistance. And the 5th White Rose flyer began with a call to all Germans, a non-violent call to action to resist the Nazis.
On the day of his execution, October 12, 1943, Willie Graff wrote to his sister, "Carry on what we began." He saw no success in his lifetime and had no idea of the impact he and his friends would make. As a conscientious Christian, He had not seen his life as having been lost, but rather exchanged for a better one.
But the story of the White Rose didn't end there. Copies of the sixth flyer were dropped over Germany by British aircraft. And when the German author and Nobel Prize winner Thomas Mann heard about the White Rose, he mentioned them in his anti-Nazi broadcasts over the BBC, praising their courage. The power of their words offered hope. Today, Germans and many from around the world recognize the significant impact of the White Rose. The students had achieved one of their goals, quote, a renewal from within of the severely wounded German spirit, unquote. Today, many schools and streets in Germany are named after the students of the White Rose. The story of the White Rose matters, and so does yours. Stories allow us to share the lives of others, to pass over into their time and space, and to empathize with their struggles. We come to know the moral dilemmas they lived and the fears they had to confront. What would we have done? What can we do today? The answer is that we can make a start. The White Rose inspires us to think about the greater good. So build on your good, because time is not on your side. And if you have to rest, rest. Resist the temptation to give up. Choose your words carefully, because language matters when it comes to good storytelling. To craft your story, first, set aside some time each day to think. Think about 3 questions. What do you hope for? What can you do about it? And how will you keep your hopes up? Willie Graff made time every day for self-reflection and wrote down his thoughts in his diary. He was always mindful of how quickly time passes. Next, strategize. Create a new space, a new connection, a new opportunity, a new relationship, or a new venture that only you can do based on your experiences, your knowledge, and your strengths. Live your story. No one else can do it exactly like you. Third, it's your story. Commit to it. It might be a work in progress, so tell it, revise it, and retell it. If your hope starts to fade, think about how you can recommit to whatever it is you set out to do. Like the White Rose, find kindred spirits and mentors who share your values and support you because they believe in you.
As your story evolves, how will you overcome obstacles to change? When it came to the White Rose, they were originally friends who shared an interest in literature. Their story began as a discussion and broadened into a much bigger conversation that led to action. They worked together to resist. Again, think, strategize, and commit.
Through telling, collecting, and listening to stories, we make an emotional connection to another human being and cultivate compassion. The White Rose inspires us to think about a higher purpose. One can only hope, and to hope is to be human. What's your story?
In the end, your story can evolve and inspire others long after you're gone. It's your time. It's your story. You never know who you will impact. The moral of this story is that we're all in this together.
What you have is an enlarged photocopy of a postcard that was produced by the University of Bonn, Germany. It came out in 2017. Willie Graff was at the University of Bonn from 1937 to 1939. But in September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland and started the Second World War. And he immediately had to stop and get trained to be a paramedic. So he had 2 years of studies under his belt, maybe similar to you right now. And he couldn't return till 1942, 2 years later. The photo that you see on the postcard from the University of Bonn is what he looked like at about age 20. If you turn on the other side, you'll see that they honor Willie Graff with a quote from a letter that he sent to his younger sister. His younger sister was 3 years younger. She was 21 at the time. And this is what he wrote to her from the Russian front, where there was some of the most cruel and violent fighting going on. Here's a translation that I hope you write down and that I hope you ponder. I'll read it to you in German and then in English. on the Russian front writing to his younger sister who's at the university, wenn ein Mensch mit aller Anstrengung lernt und forscht, so wird ihm mit jeder neuen Erkenntnis, die in sich aufnimmt, die Welt größer und weiter. When an individual learns and studies to the best of one's abilities, the world becomes greater and more vast with each new insight. Imagine someone writing from the Russian front that the world could be great. He was an idealistic, hopeful individual, and this is what he's telling his sister, who's back in Germany, trying to continue with her education. There's a raging war going on. Many universities are closing because they're being bombed. He returned to the University of Munich because it was one of the few that was still open in 1942. And that's what I'd like to leave for you. Think about how to craft your own story, to continue and build on your good, and to keep working at what you're doing. You will never know who you influence or impact with the work that you're doing. The White Rose would have been very enamored and emboldened by what we do here at Alverno with the 8 abilities. They focused on communication with their flyers, problem solving, how do you take on the Nazis, social interaction, they surrounded themselves with people who could help them, and valuing and decision making especially. How do you take on monumental moral lapses? So I encourage you to continue what you're doing. You never know who you're going to impact. My dissertation impacted other people around the world. And in December 2017, the Archdiocese of Munich saw it, and Willie Graf is now being considered for sainthood because of the work that I did. So continue. Who knew? Who knew? You'll never know who you're going to impact. So congratulations on reaching this milestone. Go out there, build on your good. We are very proud of you, and we look forward to seeing all the ways you're going to impact the world. Thank you.
Well, I know I feel inspired. I hope you do too. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing inspirational people with us and intellectual heroes that many of us may have not known about. I encourage our students to reflect on what you've learned from Stephanie and reflect on who your own intellectual heroes are and how you're going to move forward. What I'd like to do now is to explain and get you set to move off into the next phase of this event. Each of you will be going to meetings with people in your major. If you look on the back of your program, there are room numbers for each of the majors. There is also a room for social work. So those of you who are in social work will be meeting in Alexia 217. I don't know that that's on the back of all the programs, but you will be doing that. And then following your content area major meetings, there will be a reception right out here in the lobby to celebrate your accomplishments in yet another way. So, it's always good to have a little bit of celebratory food, right? So what I'd like to do now is to send you off to your rooms. If you have any questions about where you're going, feel free to ask. And on to phase 2. Thank you.